But what really matters more is what I think I'm going to title this episode, which is white pills for the election. Things to feel good about. I know there are people listening who maybe don't feel good about what happened with the election. I know there are people listening who probably do feel good about what happened in the election. I like to think that I have a diversity of thought in my audience. And I'm going to speak to everyone right now with just kind of my feelings. And to be frank, this election for me was a big old white pill. I felt like this was a very good election. I actually really liked the result. I thought this election rocked. That's what I've been saying to friends for the past few weeks is this election fucking rocked. If you like reason and you like discourse and you want the healthiest possible version of reasoned discourse that we can have for the next few years, probably at least 4 years, I think this election kind of gave us the optimal result out of the options available to us. Now, to be very clear, there were no good options. As many of you know, I did not vote for Joe Biden in this election. I also did not vote for Donald Trump in this election. I wrote in the name of the outgoing Congresswoman, Tulsi Gabbard. I was not thrilled with either side in this election, but what I was kind of hoping for was a narrow Biden victory, which he won, decisively, but maybe not super narrowly, but also not super, landslidey. And I was hoping that Republicans would win every other possible race that they could in the Senate and in the House. I was really, really pulling for Republicans because I want there to be a checked Biden presidency or a weak Biden presidency. I did not want Trump to remain president of the United States. I'm open to the idea that maybe, in my estimation, this isn't the optimal scenario for our country. I come from the perspective of many other people in the intellectual dark web on the dissident right, in that I think that the woke stuff, woke supremacy, social justice warrior nonsense is the prime threat to our society as it stands. It's been running roughshod over all of our institutions and making them kowtow to ridiculous demands. It's essentially ruined our news media. It's ruined academia. It's ruined the Democratic Party, for one. And although I'm going to talk about that a little later, how the Democratic Party might have a little bit of a resurgence of reason as a result of this election. So I do come from that perspective, and I know that there's an interesting debate over if you are primarily concerned with woke supremacy, social justice, cult nonsense, that there was an argument to be made that you should root for Biden. There was an argument to be made that you should root for Trump. I wasn't exactly rooting for Biden because I didn't vote for him, and I didn't like his campaign very much just because I thought that he kowtowed to the woke people too much. But I guess in the back of my mind, if it was kind of a gun to my head situation, I was definitely taking Biden over Trump, because, and this is kind of the white pill for you guys that are listening. If you're a Trump voter and you're really upset that Trump lost, I'm going to give you my opinion, which is that Trump was terrible for the culture war. I mean, he was terrible. If you want to be able to have conversations with people about the extremity, the extreme stuff coming out of the radical left, Trump was a huge distraction, and he was, in some cases, justifiably distracting to people, and he made it impossible for them to ever consider that there could be anything as awful as him. Because I got to be frank with you guys, he was pretty awful. Trump, and by the way, these past few weeks, he has not acquitted himself very well. He has shown to me and others who've been critical of him, even in the kind of intellectual dark web, culture warrior space, he's shown that he was not the guy to lead the fight against woke supremacy. I mean, this guy has been denying the results of the election for several weeks, and not in a nuanced way. I want to make very clear that I would kind of buy it if Trump and the Republicans were going through right now saying, oh, there are these legal remedies that the president is entitled to take in some very close states, and there are some very close states. In the Electoral College, this was a very close election. And if the argument coming from Republicans and Trump was that he wants to take these legal avenues until they are exhausted to make sure that the votes are counted 100% accurately, and if you left it at that, I could maybe let it slide, even though it's very clear that Joe Biden won this election. And I'm not going to compromise on that. Some of you may get angry at me in the comments. He won this election. somewhat narrowly, but he won. But to go back to what I was saying, Trump is not taking a nuanced perspective on this at all. And some of his sycophants in Congress are not either. I've been very disappointed in Lindsey Graham. I've been very disappointed in Ted Cruz. These are guys who I think have done some good work. And at times they speak out very effectively against some of the woke stuff. Lindsey Graham was great during the Kavanaugh confirmation hearings. He's been terrible the past few weeks because what the Republicans and Trump are claiming is that there was systematic voter fraud in the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, or in some cases, they are claiming millions of fraudulent votes. Donald Trump put out some completely unsubstantiated conspiracy theory on Twitter that there were like 2.7 million votes that were switched away from him or something because of some company called Dominion. I looked into it. This is nonsense. This is nonsense. He is putting just Alex Jones level conspiracy theories out there. And I'm not an Alex Jones guy. I'm not an InfoWars guy. I don't know if some of you people listening maybe have the wrong idea if you think that everyone who's in the intellectual dark web or who hates woke nonsense is just going to believe this complete bullshit about election fraud. And Trump is out there spreading 100% disinformation on Twitter, just saying, he said, I won this election by a lot. And he's repeated this message numerous times. No, he didn't. That is a fact. That is, I mean, they're going to do a little bit more work with these lawsuits and they'll look at the votes. There is no evidence. I'm someone who believes in this idea of the burden of proof, and the burden of proof is on the one making the claim. And if the claim is that there was widespread voter fraud that should invalidate the result of this election, as the media has called it across the board, which, by the way, is how America has gotten closure in every past election, maybe with the exception of 2000. Everyone's saying the media doesn't call elections in the United States. The Electoral College does. You're technically right. Joe Biden is not technically president until the Electoral College meets in December. But this is not what this is not what Trump people were saying in 2016 when the election was called for Donald Trump. And by the way, there's plenty of hypocrisy on the left here as well, because the left tried to delegitimize Donald Trump's completely valid Electoral College victory, albeit he didn't win the popular vote, but he won the Electoral College in 2016. And the left went crazy with Russia, that there was some collusion with the Russian government, which turned out to be total bullshit, as we saw when the Mueller report was finally released and didn't have any. So, I'm not just picking on the Trump people. I'm not just picking on Republicans. I'm picking on everybody who, when an election happens and they lose, they immediately go, oh, no, we didn't lose. How could we possibly lose? This is part of politics, people. Sometimes you lose. I've been on both sides of this. I was a Democrat for many, many years. Now I'm not a Republican, but I generally root for them more than I root for Democrats, even though I'm an independent. Except Trump, though. Couldn't root for him. Really hard guy to root for. He's just spreading conspiracy theories and serving as a massive, massive distraction and just undercutting everyone who's in the culture war, trying to bring attention to the dangers of woke supremacy. He is undercutting them and has been for 4 years. He did some good things. I give Trump full credit where credit is due. Trump's education secretary, Betsy DeVos, reestablished due process rights for mostly male college students accused of sexual assault on college campuses. That was a great thing that Betsy DeVos did, likely at the behest of Trump. I mean, I assume because she serves at the pleasure of the president, right? And he also banned diversity, critical race theory indoctrination sessions at federal contractors. 100% credit to Trump. And these are things that we're probably going to lose now that Biden is president. And it is disappointing. I can't have my cake and eat it too. I kind of wanted Biden to win a little bit more than I wanted Trump to win, albeit with a Republican Congress to check him. But even without a Democratic Congress, Biden can still fuck up the due process situation for college kids, and he can still revert. He already has announced that he will reverse the executive order which bans critical race theory indoctrination sessions. So that's disappointing, but at the end of the day, the argument that I want to make is similar to an argument that I think it was Yasha Monk made in, I want to say it was The Atlantic, maybe it was Vox. And it was the idea that if you hate wokeness, you actually kind of want Trump to lose. Because now that Trump is going to be an outgoing president, he's no longer going to be president come January, we'll be able to have conversations with some people who were so obsessed with Trump and all they wanted to talk about all day was Trump, where he'll no longer be relevant because he won't be president and will actually be able to say like, hey, this other thing that you should be concerned about, let's talk about that. And that's woke supremacy. That's an anti-free speech, anti-due process, anti-American set of ideas that has been taking over our core institutions. So to sum it up, I was pretty pleased with the result of this election because Trump lost, but perhaps more importantly, Republicans down ballot won overwhelmingly. This was not a vindication of woke tactics from the media and in other places where they've just tried to discredit anything that's even nominally right wing or just not super woke left. The tactics used by an insane media, like the Russiagate conspiracies, the ridiculous coverage of the rioting where they tried to say that it was, white supremacists. Yeah, well, all the white supremacists in Chicago and Minneapolis and New York going out and causing that. That's what they tried to say it was. There's too many ways to count. It would be impossible to count the ways in which the media and the Democratic Party have tried to propagandize people into believing ridiculous shit over the course of the past several years. And I felt like the media and the Democratic Party would be vindicated if there was a landslide victory, a clear and decisive victory for Democrats in this election. There was a somewhat decisive victory for Joe Biden in the presidential race. There was not a decisive victory at all, assuming that Democrats lose even one of the two runoff elections in Georgia. The argument could be made that there was a decisive victory for congressional Republicans because they gained way more seats in the House, almost took control of the House of Representatives. They're going to end up 5 or 6 seats away from a House majority and will probably take the majority in 2022 in the midterms. And they've maintained control of the Senate. This was way better than the result that the leftists were anticipating. And by that, I mean the radical leftists, people who were like, this is going to be a total repudiation of Trump and the Republican Party, and it's going to make us a uniparty country, a one-party state, where the Democrats just get to do whatever the hell they want. They were going to pack the Supreme Court, right? If they had control of the Senate and the House and the presidency, they were just going to draft up legislation with a simple majority, pack the Supreme Court, say, fuck your Supreme Court appointments, we're taking that too. They're not going to be able to do that now. That's already a done deal. Even if they win the runoff elections in Georgia, a moderate Democrat in West Virginia, Joe Manchin, has said he will not vote for that bill. This is a big deal. These are big victories. And this is a white pill for people listening. I know some of you may be upset that Trump lost. Some of you are probably glad he lost. If you're upset that he lost, this could have been way worse for you. If you're like a partisan Republican, which I'm not quite. I mean, if I was a partisan Republican, I would have voted for Trump, and I did not do that. I don't just exclusively vote one party or the other. But if you are a partisan Republican, this was not the worst result that you could have gotten on election night. To put it into perspective, what I was anticipating on election night was a huge Democratic landslide, and many, many people thought this was going to happen. A lot of political predictors, a lot of journalists, a lot of people in the Republican Party were saying this is going to get extremely fucking out of hand. Like, we are going to lose maybe 10 seats in the Senate. We're going to lose seats in the House, even though we already have lost the majority in 2018. Trump's going to get only 120, electoral votes. He's going to get wiped out. I mean, and also there were these ballot measures all across the country that could have passed, including one in California to make, affirmative action, basically reverse racism, legal and codified in the state constitution, which failed. There are so many things that could have gone way, way worse if you are a partisan Republican. And from my perspective, as somebody who's, I like to think, nonpartisan, that's the subtitle for this podcast, and the banner is it's a nonpartisan podcast. I sort of root for whoever I think is going to deal with my issues best, whether it's a Democrat or Republican. And so in this case, I kind of had a weird thing I was hoping for, Biden presidency, but as weak as possible, as many Republican seats in Congress as possible. And I got it. I got this thing that was a weird thing to hope for. And I got it. So where a lot of people are kind of dissatisfied with this election, because if you're Democrats, you're upset that you lost in Congress. And if you're Republicans, you're upset that you lost the presidency. I'm just partying on. I'm like, this election rocked. This election was so much better than I anticipated. I sat down on election day to watch the results coming in with like my head just kind of like in my hands like this, just like, this is going to get really out of hand. Like, this is going to become such a big Democratic landslide, and it's just going to be the woke takeover of this country, where Biden's going to be like, I have a mandate. I'm going to do whatever these people tell me to do. And I don't think he's going to do that. There have been all these articles. There was a great article in Politico. There have been articles all over the place about how the Democratic Party is kind of doing some soul searching right now. They did so much worse than they were expected to do in these congressional elections. And it appears that they may actually moderate themselves a little bit. Now, there's also the chance they don't do that at all. There's a very good chance that the AOC woke party of the wing of the woke wing of the party just continues to make Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden kowtow to them whenever possible. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. I mean, Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden have shown very little capacity. This is why I wouldn't vote for Joe Biden. He has shown zero capacity to push back on these people. I give him a little bit of credit for at least definitively calling out the rioting as destructive, but he would not acknowledge the existence of Antifa, which is a thing that absolutely exists. I made an entire video making fun of this. And so, yeah, it's possible. At the very least, it is a question right now what the Democratic Party is going to do and how they are going to conduct themselves over the course of the next few years. Whereas had there been a landslide election, I think they just would have gone, let's do whatever we want. Let's do whatever we want. Pack the courts, get rid of the filibuster, create, make Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. into their own states so that we can get more seats in the Senate, more seats in the House, and let's just pass all these fucking bills and we'll be defunding the police all across the country and municipal governments. Defund the police took a huge hit on election day. A lot of Democrats are saying that the defund the police message hurt them down ballot. Joe Manchin has said this. Connor Lamb in Pennsylvania has said this. Many progressive journalists are coming around to this idea. I don't think you're going to hear the term defund the police or abolish the police very much for the next year or two, at least not in a positive light. Let's put it that way. And that's a huge win, people. We were in a scary place over the summer where it seemed like the woke religion had completed its takeover of the Democratic Party and the media. The New York Times, CNN just completely turning. It's like the last part of if you've ever seen The Fly with Jeff Goldblum, he slowly turns into this disgusting mutated fly monster. And it felt like the media and the Democratic Party were in their final stages. And now I think at least the Democratic Party has kind of, I mean, the media still fucking blows, but the Democratic Party, I think, has earned back a little bit of sanity because they kind of got their ass kicked in these congressional elections. I mean, the Democrats got their asses kicked. Again, if you're a partisan Republican and you feel like you got nothing to be happy about out of this election, I think your standards were way too high. You may have lost the presidency, but boy, did you kick some ass in the House and the Senate. I mean, you kicked ass. This was down ballot. This was a disaster for Democrats. They look like they very nearly actually lost the House of Representatives. It didn't quite happen, but that was not supposed to happen. That was something that everyone said had like a 1% chance of happening. What did happen was something that had like a 10% chance of happening, and that's Republicans nearly taking control of the House of Representatives and keeping the Senate. So anyway, it's a lot of election talk. I'm just really happy. And again, white pill for everyone. This election, because Trump is gone and the Biden presidency is going to have to do a little bit of soul searching, especially if they have to deal with a Republican Senate, which it looks like they probably will. This could be a time when things kind of slow down a little bit and we can really evaluate the cultural influence as things in politics calm down because Trump is no longer there. Biden cannot be a super woke president because he's checked by the Senate. That will sort of make politics a little irrelevant for a little bit. And we can focus on the thing that really matters, which is culture. Culture is the thing that really, really matters at the end of the day. And I think we'll be able to focus on that. And people will maybe start to notice that we kind of have a one-party culture right now where, Team Blue or whatever you want to call it, the blue church, woke supremacy, whatever you want to call it, has kind of taken control of our cultural institutions. I think people will kind of maybe start to wake up to that because the thing that's been preventing them from doing that in many spaces has been this obsession with Donald Trump. And that obsession, it's going to have to subside a little bit because he will no longer be president of the United States come January. So there are a lot of opportunities for conversation in the coming months, in the coming years. And I want to encourage everyone listening, now that Trump is gone, to have conversations with friends of yours that you think are reasonable. Go to people that you think are reasonable. Maybe they're on the left. Maybe they believe some of the woke stuff. but you think they're capable of independent thought. People who have some potential, people who laugh at your offensive jokes, even though they're kind of woke, people who you're like, oh, I see you. I see that somewhere in there is a reasonable person or a human being who's not completely ideologically possessed. And I want you to go to those people. And I want you to have conversations with them where you're showing them what happened at Evergreen College, where you're showing them what happened at UC Berkeley and all the other college campuses in 2017, where you're showing them what happened with the riots, the real story of what happened with the riots, which is that, as Michael Tracy reported, I recommend giving Michael Tracy a follow on Twitter. As Michael Tracy reported, these riots were much, much more widespread and much more damaging than the media wanted to let on. And they were not done by white supremacists. They were done by Antifa and Black Lives Matter protesters. Talk to them about the fact that Black Lives Matter is a very flawed organization with some weird anti-Semitic undertones, with some weird anti-American undertones. I mean, kind of overtones. Like if you actually go to the Black Lives Matter website, I think they removed it, but for a while there was all this stuff about like you got to destroy the nuclear family and the whiteness and American. There's a Democratic Senate candidate who's still. They found footage of him. He's a preacher or something, and he was preaching about how we need to eradicate whiteness, and it's just. Talk to people about this stuff. Talk to people about the crazy woke shit, particularly after Trump leaves office in January. And if they bring up Trump, if they try to say, oh, but the Republicans and Trump, be like, Trump's gone. And you'll finally be able to say that. For months, I've been saying Trump is probably going to be gone because I anticipated that he would lose. And that's what I've been saying to people. Soon we'll be able to say he is irrelevant. Stop talking about him. Stop bringing him up. And there will be people who never want to let go of their hate for Trump. Some people are so psychologically damaged, they have such a bad case of Trump derangement syndrome that he'll be out of office for decades and they'll still be talking about him. These are people who are deeply, deeply psychologically damaged, and it is the fault of the media, of college professors who are filling their heads with this idea that this man was going to be Hitler, which, by the way, we have proven definitively he was not. He had a full 4-year term in office and we didn't turn into Nazi Germany. Anyway, there's going to be people that you can't have these conversations with, but I really, really encourage you to have conversations now that maybe you couldn't before, because I've had lots of experiences, again, and I've said this on the show many times before, I've had lots of experiences where I'm trying to talk to people about woke supremacy and I'm getting somewhere. And they're saying, oh, this is really bad. That's terrible what happened to Bret Weinstein. That's terrible what happened at UC Berkeley. That's terrible what's happened with these riots and with Black Lives Matter. Oh, that's a terrible thing they say on their website. People are coming around, and then it gets to like, oh, but Trump, though. Like, we got to make sure we get rid of him first. And it's just so exhausting. And I am so, so excited to have that not be the case. And simultaneously, I get to have my cake and eat it too, because the Biden-Harris administration cannot and probably will not, if they don't have control of the Senate, do any crazy woke shit. They'll do a couple of things. Like I said, they'll use the education department to do all the Title IX stuff where guys have no due process rights on college campuses. That's a disaster. They'll reestablish the indoctrination sessions at federal contractors. It sucks. I wish that I could have my cake and eat it too and not have those things happen and also not have Trump. But at the end of the day, I think it's more important that Trump is kind of an agitator and somebody who makes, our side of the culture war that stands against woke supremacy look bad. I'll take him being gone as the first and most important thing. So this election was a good thing. And I really, really want people to accept the results and to appreciate the results as like, I don't know, these days everyone's always so sad and so black-pilled and so like everything's a disaster. I feel better than I have felt in months about the culture war. I haven't felt this good since at least May, since at least before the George Floyd riots. I have not felt this good, like as if there's hope that maybe people will wake up to the danger of woke supremacy since at least May. So, feel good. Come on, take the white pill. This was an awesome election if you like reason and you like discourse and you want these problems to get solved. It's going to make it easier. It's going to take away a lot of the distractions because the government isn't going to be very relevant, frankly. It's going to be a divided government that isn't doing anything and that doesn't have a raving lunatic at the top. Sorry, but that's just, Trump has been, as particularly for the past few weeks, has just been insane. And he's always been, Trump has always put completely unsubstantiated bullshit on his Twitter. And that's what he's been doing for the past several weeks. He has just been awful. And he's been terrible. I mean, he's been putting nonsense about this voter fraud stuff. And I want to say again, accept the results of this election. There are things you can come away with that are positive developments, even if you're fully on the right, which I'm not quite there, but if you are fully on the right, there are things for you to be happy about. Trump got more support amongst minorities. The narrative on the left that this is a deeply racially divided country where all white people are on the right and are racist and all people of color are on the left and are these, like noble victims of racism, that was completely debunked by these election results. Donald Trump gained support amongst Latinos and blacks, and he lost support in one group, and that was whites. It was old white people. That was the one group that started voting more left. And it's interesting to think about how or why this happened. And I think it's because there's a multitude of reasons. I mean, Latinos are religious and they're culturally conservative. Black people's neighborhoods were being destroyed by these riots. And white people are the ones who have these luxury beliefs and these, bougie ideas of, oh, the biggest problem in the world is that somebody won't use my friend's gender pronouns, because white people just have this. It's just funny because we're meant to believe that like white people are racist, but really white people have this weird guilt fixation. And I think that's what's causing maybe more white people to vote Democrat. Because you have again, it's fascinating. This is fascinating. This is a good thing to take away from this election because it's fascinating. And it goes against the woke narrative. People of color voted more Republican and white people voted more Democrat. We became less racially polarized for the first time since at least 2004 or 2000, according to exit polls in the presidential elections. We became less racially polarized. And I would say it's like white people are becoming more guilty. The Black Lives Matter propaganda has been most effective on them, and it's actually turned black people away from the Democrats. I've spoken to many, many black people, and I've seen a lot of commentary from black people online about how this Black Lives Matter stuff doesn't represent them. Like they're personally responsible for their actions and that they don't spend all day thinking about the legacy of slavery, of something that didn't directly impact them, their parents, their grandparents, or probably not their great-grandparents either. Many black people in the United States are not even the descendants of slaves. But in any case, yeah, white people have this guilt that is being instilled in them. And particularly young white people are being raised to believe in university, through the education system, through all of the media that they consume, that they're guilty of some kind of original sin of white privilege, that they're born with this thing. And I think maybe that is ironically causing us to become, at both ends of the spectrum, less racially polarized, because white people are going more Democratic, people of color going more Republican. This is, again, another white pill for you to take, another thing for you to be happy about coming out of this election. Republicans did really well in down ballot races. Another thing, so far, every single freshman member of the Republican House delegation, every single Republican candidate who won a Democratic seat in the House and flipped a seat has either been a woman or a person of color. Burgess Owens in Utah is a black male, and then all the other people who flipped Democratic seats, I believe, have been women. This is going against the narrative. This is going to make it easier to point out to people that this idea that Democrats are the party of women and minorities and Republicans are the party of old white men, and that that's how we should view our politics, which is a super one-dimensional, shitty way to talk about this stuff. We can discredit that with the results of this election. This election rocked. This election was awesome. I loved it. I enjoyed it. I had a good time. Everyone seems to be, people were happy initially if they won, but wanted Biden to win. And then, of course, they immediately got upset again. And then a lot of partisan Republicans who I'm friends with are like super upset. And it's like, dude, this election rocked. It was awesome. It was like this very unlikely thing that was going to happen where I wanted like different results in different, parts of the government, and got exactly what I wanted. So accept the results of this election. It's not that bitter of a pill to swallow. It's just not. This idea that it's this extremely bitter pill to swallow and that it's so painful and it's so frustrating if you're on the right. It's like, no, the Republican Party is going to be better off without Trump. They need a more nuanced populist, whether it's Tucker Carlson or Dan Crenshaw or Ron DeSantis. I don't know. There's tons of candidates that can do a better job than Donald Trump ever did, because the guy was an nincompoop and he said stupid shit all the time that made it so easy. Here's the thing. Don't make it easy for the media to propagandize people by saying things that are so on the line, and all they have to do is push it a little bit or cut out like one word. At least make them work for it, because the media misrepresents everyone that goes against their agenda. But at least they have to work for it sometimes, and so you can sort of see the strain that they're going through to twist something that somebody does. So, for instance, when the media tries to portray Jordan Peterson as being some kind of racist, fascist, sexist, despot, it looks ridiculous and it causes people to wake up because they go, this guy's not that. With Trump, a lot of people believe it because, again, he doesn't acquit himself well. He doesn't conduct himself properly. You can kind of see Trump being a fascist racist because of some of the stuff that he's done. I don't necessarily think that's what he is. I certainly don't think he's a fascist. I don't really know if he's a racist. I don't know. Maybe. But in any case, it's the fact that I even have to ask the question, like, do I know if Donald Trump is a racist? We shouldn't be able to do that with our presidents, people. I mean, this is ridiculous. Give me Jordan Peterson or Ben Shapiro over Donald Trump any day of the week. There are better people to lead, to be the face of anti-political correctness, anti-wokeness in the culture war. There are better people than Donald Trump. And we are now going to be able to lift those people up because there is not an occupant in the White House who's taken up all the oxygen. People associated anything that was not woke with Trump. And now that's not going to happen anymore. This is a good thing. So accept the results of this election, please. It's embarrassing. Can I say that it's embarrassing when I go to Twitter and I see people that I respected? I'm not going to mention anyone by name, but there are some people that I really respect who have been very influential on me, who are saying things on Twitter about this election that are ridiculous. They are claiming election fraud and going all over the place screaming about election fraud and saying that this election result was illegitimate, and they're being just as, if not more crazy than the Democrats were with Russiagate. It is embarrassing. Stop. Accept the results of this election. It isn't that bad, people. There's not that much to be upset about. And if you're like me, you should be thrilled. You should be absolutely thrilled. You should be very happy with these election results. And in 2 years, you could be even happier. The Republicans might could take control of the House of Representatives, and then you get President Nikki Haley or President Dan Crenshaw in 2024. God forbid Donald Trump run again. Do not want that to happen. But Republicans could, before you know it, be in control of all three chambers of Congress and could actually do stuff to push back against woke supremacy.